Good evening, Americans. It's the Mark Bradley Show. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition. Tonight on the show, I want to get to a very important issue to me, and another very important issue to me that I'll get to first is bass fishing. I want to let you know how the bass fishing is on the Snake River near Asotin, Washington. And I want to tell you a little bit about this. There's a story came out back in April and May. Maybe you heard about it, about a guy named Daniel Hauser. We'll get to that right after the fishing report. That's why the show's late getting posted today. I took the boat out right after work, went to Asotin, Washington, and put in there. The water's still a little high and flowing pretty fast. However, the bass fishing is quite good now. A lot of fish up in the bushes that are underwater that normally aren't. I caught a very nice big fish, 3-pound bass, pulled right out from right next to the base of some of those bushes. A lot of fish out there. They're biting good. I had my best success with a little Strike King Mini King spinnerbait. Well, it's a little miniature spinnerbait. That worked really well. Tube jigs caught fish, crankbaits, minnows. They're hitting just about everything. The water temperature's up to 67 degrees. It's nice and warm, and the fishing is great. I'm going to go back out this weekend. Hopefully we have as much success. We'll take some kids out there and catch some fish and have a lot of fun. Now on to something that's probably more important than my fishing, but also not nearly as fun. This is a very difficult subject, and one that an answer does not readily present itself. There are some serious questions that I think all Americans have to ask themselves when you hear this story. Maybe you heard about Daniel Hauser and his mom when they went, basically they went on the run as fugitives from a court order that ordered Daniel to undergo chemotherapy. And here's the story from the AP, from the Associated Press, on May 28th, after they had come back and he had undergone chemotherapy. It said the boy's parents, who initially resisted chemotherapy out of a preference for alternative treatments, faced legal consequences if they skipped the appointment. Daniel also attended an appointment a day earlier. The family had said an earlier round of chemotherapy made Daniel, who suffers from Hodgkin's lymphoma, feel sick and hardened their resolve against further treatment. A Brown County judge ordered the treatment, prompting Daniel and Colleen Hauser to leave their home in Sleepy Eye and spend a week on the lam. The family prefers natural healing practices suggested by a religious group called, I'm going to give this my best shot, I'm sure it's native, Nemenhah Band, which says it follows American Indian beliefs. Earlier this week, the family agreed to accept chemotherapy when the doctors vowed to integrate some natural treatments favored by the Hausers. If you heard about this story, I don't know what your initial response was. When I first heard the story, I said, wait a minute, why is this boy being forced to undergo chemotherapy treatment against his will and against his mother's will? And they didn't initially say it was against his will. They just said it was against his parents' will. And it turns out, after further investigation, he was uncomfortable with the treatments. He said he didn't want to undergo chemotherapy, and he was willing to take an alternative route. Now the question becomes, how can a county judge order you or anyone to undergo medical treatment? Now they're saying this because he's a minor, but this highlights a very delicate balance that we have in America between the state and the parents. Who do the kids belong to, and who is primarily responsible for their well-being? Now most people, if you ask who's responsible for a child's well-being, they say, well, the parents are. However, what if the parents aren't doing their job? What if the parents aren't properly feeding the child? What if the parents aren't properly getting medical attention for the child? What if the parents are possibly even abusing the child or neglecting the child? Well, then most Americans would say, well, yeah, then social workers step in and the child is taken away if the parents refuse to care for him or her. The problem becomes, it is such a fine line between who does have the ultimate responsibility for the care of the child. Whose will wins in the end. And in this case, a court order won over the parents' will. Now, the parents did willingly submit. They didn't have to go to jail. They weren't arrested ever, and they willingly submitted to the court order. And that's good. That's probably good for everybody in this case. However, what would happen if it happened to you? What would you do if it was one of your kids and you had a particular way of doing things? There's a lot of things. Some people have suggested anti-spanking laws, calling that child abuse. I know as a child I was spanked, and many people my age that I know were as well. And especially in the older generation, a lot of kids. You grew up, and if you did something bad, you got maybe dad's belt, or maybe mom had a spanking stick, or maybe just the palm of the hand. There are a lot of theories on how to spank and all that, but we don't need to get into that. That's not the issue. The point is, who is in charge of the well-being of the child? Are you willing to give up your rights and say, you know what, the state knows best, our government knows best, and so I'll let them decide what's best for my child, or are you going to take the responsibility for your own children? I know personally that I will do my best, and I say this now because it's easy because I don't have any kids yet, but I plan on doing my best to feed them healthy food, to take care of them in the best way I know how, with the knowledge that God has given me and the knowledge that God has given my wife, and we'll work together to raise our kids as best as we possibly can and take care of them and make sure that they are healthy and have all the skills and abilities they need to go out into the world and make something good of themselves and help other people. But what of those families and those parents who weren't raised like I was and don't know? They simply don't have the knowledge base necessary to raise a child to their optimum potential. What about those people? Should their children be taken away? I tell you, it is a fine line, and if we don't pay attention to this, before you know it, people like our president, who does believe that fathers are important, I told you that on a previous show, would have an idea that the state needs to provide infant care for parents who don't know how. The state needs to provide daycare for those who don't know how to take care of their kids. The state needs to provide elementary school and secondary education. And I mean, where does it stop? Where is the line? And I'm going to keep asking that question until I get an answer, and until I can come up with a good enough answer so that kids who are in a bad situation and who have abusive parents, so that we can protect them as individuals without threatening the rights of all other parents in the country. And if you don't think it's a fine line, I ask you to ask the questions of the situation. Ask, if this were applied to my child and my family, how would I feel? If this was someone I know, how would I feel? I know people in various situations. My wife's cousin has drug addict parents who are separated. She has an abusive stepfather. It's a terrible situation, and the system is not helping her. Well, that's a problem, wouldn't you say? She's in a terrible situation, and nobody can do anything to make it any better. But what about those kids like Daniel who simply don't feel that chemotherapy is the right treatment for them? And there's a lot of natural path doctors that would agree, that would say, no, there are better ways and there are other ways. It's a great question for this great nation, and one that I think with discussion and a lot of thinking on the part of some Americans, we can come up with a good answer for this. It's not there yet, but also it hasn't become a big enough problem yet. And until we recognize that it's coming, are we going to get blindsided by this? I suggest we start thinking now, and we start the process of coming up with a better plan for how to take care of the next generation. Thanks for watching the Mark Bradley Show. We'll be back tomorrow night. It's great to see you all. Have a great night.